Hi friends, it's Lisa Hetrick, illustrator for Gina K Designs, and I'm so grateful you could join me today. I have a really fun card tutorial today that's inspired by this card. We're going to have a little bit of stencil pattern play, and I'm going to jack it up with a little bit of watercolor techniques with oxide inks, and we're going to have some fun with texture using the Gina K Designs Pastillage. So let's have some fun and take a quick look at the supplies I'm going to be using today. The star of the show for our card today is the Gina K Designs Art Deco stencil. Holy smokes, I love this stencil and we're going to have fun playing with it today. I'm using picked raspberry and twisted citron distress oxide ink and the Gina K Designs Obsidian Amalgam ink. I've got two of the blender brushes from Picket Fence Studios. I have some glue and some foam tape and some water. We're going to be creating some really fun background texture with the Pastillage from Gina K Designs. This is such a fun medium to work with, and I love using the ThermoWeb Stencil Pal to apply it. So let's talk about the stamps. I'm using my Your Wings stamp set, and we're also going to use Friendship Flower. I want to use the thank you sentiment from the Friendship Flower stamp set. Now my paper stocks are, I'm using the heavyweight cardstock from Gina K Designs cut to an A2 sized card. I also have a couple pieces of the layering weight cardstock because we're going to do the pastillage piece and we also need to do the body of the butterfly. I have a piece of watercolor paper here as well that I'm going to be using for the oxides, and all of the supplies that I'm using are listed below. Okay, let's dive into the pattern play with the Art Deco stencil. I've got my pixie spray here, and I've got a little bit of a light tack of it on the back of this Art Deco stencil, and I'm putting it down onto my watercolor paper, and I have the name of the watercolor paper listed below. I'm using the Arteza brand for today, and you can see that it sticks really, really well, and that stencil is not moving. So I've got my picket fence brushes here, and I'm just lightly just kind of going in a circular motion and applying the picked raspberry and the twisted citron around in this circular motion, just letting the colors mix and blend together. You could do this with distress inks if you wanted to. I wanted to use the oxides because they're kind of fun to play with and they have a matte finish to them. And honestly, these two colors are my super faves. I just love them. They're bright and happy, and I'm just going to let them mix and mash together on this watercolor paper through this Art Deco stencil. Love it. I'm loving it, loving it, loving it. I'm going to add a little bit of water to it now that I've pulled the stencil back, and it's going to give that watercolor background look that I'm looking for. And I'm just going to get out my heat tool and dry it up and set it aside so that we can move on to creating texture with the pastillage using the Art Deco stencil. So I've adhered the Art Deco stencil to a piece of Gina K Designs white layering cardstock, and I'm just kind of eyeballing where I'm going to be cutting out that rectangular piece with the die, the Gina K Designs die. But first, I'm going to put the pastillage on. So I'm applying a big chunk of it with this spatula, and I'm going to use the Stencil Pal to spread it out. And what the Stencil Pal does, or you could use a credit card or anything like that, it just really helps thin it out and get it into the grooves of the stencil, but to leave you a really nice thin amount onto your paper. And oh, look at the reveal here. I just love it. This stencil is so crisp and the pastillage just loves it. It's just so pretty. And it's going to make for a great background. I'm going to let it dry and then I'm going to cut it out with the rectangle die. So let's move ahead and create the butterfly on the pattern that we've already created with the Art Deco stencil. So I'm pulling the two wings from the Your Wing stamp set, and I'm going to put them down here and just nest them together to make a whole butterfly on my stamping block. So I'm just going to nest these two together to create that whole butterfly shape. And then I'm going to take the pattern that we've created on the watercolor paper, just kind of figure out where the color is that I want to use. And I'm going to ink up the butterfly. It doesn't matter what color you ink it up in because we're going to be cutting this butterfly out. But I'm going to stamp it on the back of the pattern that we created with the Art Deco stencil. And then I'm going to move ahead and cut that butterfly out so that we have the shape of the butterfly in the pattern that we created with the Art Deco stencil. And I'm just digging it. I love this. So I'm going to cut into the wings just a little bit more here, just so we can get some movement of those upper wings. Now we're going to move on to stamping the card base with some of the leaves and greenery. So here is the Pastillage texture piece that we created and I cut out with the rectangular stencil. I just love the way it looks and the subtle texture that it's going to create for this card base. Okay, so I'm using this Pastillage layer and I'm going to take a pencil and just put little tick marks in the corners on my base of my cardstock so that I can begin to stamp around that area and know that the leaves from the Your Wing stamp set are going to be they're going to kind of be peekaboos. A little bit of it are going to be behind the Pastillage layer and a little bit of the layers are going to show through. I'm using Twisted Citron and I'm just working my way around that rectangle and I'm using both the left and the right version of the leaves from the Your Wing stamp set and just kind of creating that mirror image with the stamp. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to assembling the card. We've got all the pieces, so now it's time to put the pieces together. So I'm going to put a little bit of foam tape on the back of this Pastillage piece and lay it right into where those tick marks are so that I can layer that butterfly on top. So I'm just adding a little bit of foam tape to the back and then I'm going to pop it right onto the card front here. And those tick marks really kind of help me position it right where I wanted it to be. And I just put a little bit of foam tape on the back of the butterfly. And I'm going to nest that butterfly towards the top third of the Pastillage piece. And now we're going to move on to stamping the butterfly body using the Twisted Citron, and that's going to help draw attention to the center of the butterfly. We've got that Twisted Citron all around the edges, and it's just a nice complement to what's going on the outer edge of the design and the center of the butterfly. So I'm using the Thank You from the Friendship Flower stamp set, and I'm going to nest this right inside of the butterfly body. So the sentiment on this card is going to be in the body of the butterfly. I'm using obsidian and stamping right on top of that Distress Oxide, and then I'm just going to go ahead and adhere the body of the butterfly right to the center here. A little bead of Gina K Designs glue and shampoo. It's right there. Just love it. Love it. Okay, I'm going to put some finishing touches on the card with some Emerald City sequins, and I'm just going to nest them on the top of the butterfly wings. So here's a final look at the card, and I had so much fun using the Art Deco stencil in two different ways. One with the Pastillage. Look at the crispness of that texture. Now I debated on whether or not I wanted to add some color to that texture, and you can with the Pastillage, but I decided that tone on tone, white on white just kind of really popped. And I'm loving playing with this using the distressings. It was just a super fun card and a really fun way to use the wings from the Your Wing stamp set to create kind of a die cut pattern. Just loving it. I hope you enjoyed today's card tutorial. Thanks so much for joining me. Please consider sharing the joy by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. And I hope you'll come on in and take a look at some more of my card and watercolor tutorials on this channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.